32 years. That's how long I had been married to the man who handed me a cup of coffee at the Greyhound station on a gray November morning and told me to drink up because the road to Buffalo was a long one. I remember the exact temperature of that coffee. Lukewarm, not hot like he usually made it at home with the French press he gave me for our 20th anniversary. Lukewarm, the way you'd want a child to drink it so they wouldn't burn their tongue. The way you'd want someone to drink it fast. His name doesn't matter anymore, but I called him my husband for 32 years, so let me just call him that. The man I married at 23 in the small Methodist church in Pittsburgh, with my mother crying in the front pew and my father walking me down an aisle that smelled like lilies and floor polish. The man who built a contracting business with my money I inherited from my grandmother, who'd warned me on her deathbed never to put a man's name on anything I owned alone. I didn't listen. I was in love. I signed everything. That morning at the Port Authority terminal in Manhattan, where we'd driven in from our house in Westchester at 4 in the morning because I needed a change of scenery, I sat on a metal bench with a paper cup in my hands and watched my husband smile at me the way he used to smile when our kids were little. "Drink it, sweetheart," he said. "It's a long ride." And I drank it, because I had been drinking what that man poured me for 3 decades and I had no reason in that fluorescent-lit terminal to suspect that the last sip would taste faintly of almonds and something metallic underneath. He helped me onto the bus. The driver tore my ticket. My husband leaned in close, brushed my hair behind my ear like he was tucking in a child, and whispered something I will hear in my sleep until the day I actually do die. "In an hour, you won't even remember your own name. I want to tell you that I understood right then, that I screamed, that I grabbed the driver, that I threw the cup at his face, but I didn't. My tongue felt thick. The fluorescent lights of the terminal had started to smear sideways. I sat down in seat 14B and pressed my forehead against the cold glass window and watched my husband of 32 years walk away across the concrete, hands in the pockets of the camel coat I'd bought him for Christmas, and I thought, and this is the part I'm most ashamed of, I thought, he loves me. Then the bus pulled out and the world went white. Let me back up. Let me tell you about my daughter, because none of this makes sense without her. My daughter is 31 years old. She's a public defender in Albany, which is 2 hours north of where her father and I lived, and which she chose, I think partly because it was far enough that she didn't have to come home for Sunday dinners, but close enough that she could if she wanted to. She didn't want to, most of the time. I told myself it was because she was busy. I told myself a lot of things. When she was 16, she came home from a school trip to the city and sat on the edge of my bed while I was folding laundry and said, "Mom, I saw Dad." "Saw him where?" I said. "He's in Boston, honey. He's at the trade show." "He's not in Boston," she said. "I saw him at the plaza. He was holding hands with a woman. She was younger. She had blonde hair down to her waist." I remember the exact way I folded the towel I was holding. I remember smoothing it 3 times and setting it on the stack and turning to my 16-year-old daughter and saying, in the voice I usually reserved for shoplifters and door-to-door salesmen, "That is a horrible thing to make up about your father." She looked at me like I had slapped her. "I'm not making it up," she said. "You are," I said. "You're confused. You saw someone who looked like him." "Mom, don't." That was the word I used. Don't. Like she was a dog about to track mud onto the carpet. My beautiful 16-year-old daughter with a gap between her front teeth and a stack of summer reading books in her backpack telling me the truth? And I said don't. And she got up off my bed and she walked out of my room, and in some real sense she never walked back in. For 15 years I told myself she had been wrong. I told myself it so often it became a fact, like the kitchen being yellow or the dog being named Riley. My husband had been at a trade show in Boston. My daughter had seen someone who looked like him. End of story. My son believed me, or my son pretended to believe me, which I now understand is a different and worse thing. He was 19 at the time. He had just started working at his father's company in the Bronx office, learning the contracting business so he could take it over someday. He was a sweet boy, I thought, quiet, loyal. He played golf with his father every Saturday from April to October. He told me, when I asked him point blank, that of course Dad was in Boston, that of course there was no other woman, that his sister was a teenager who liked attention. I chose him. Every Sunday for 15 years, when my daughter didn't come home for dinner, I chose my son and my husband and the version of my life where the towels were folded right and the kitchen was yellow and nothing was wrong. I woke up in a hospital in Erie, Pennsylvania. I want to say I woke up gradually, the way you do from a nap, but I didn't. I woke up the way you wake up from a nightmare. Gasping, my chest hurting, my hands gripping a thin white blanket I didn't recognize. There was a fluorescent light above me, a heart monitor beeping somewhere, a man sitting in a chair next to my bed reading a newspaper. He looked up when I made a sound. "Easy," he said. "Easy now. You're okay, you're in the hospital." He was maybe 65. White hair, glasses pushed up on top of his head, a flannel shirt under a corduroy jacket. He looked like somebody's grandfather, somebody's retired science teacher. "Where am I?" said. My voice came out a croak. "St. Vincent's, in Erie. The bus driver pulled over when you stopped breathing right. They took you off in Pennsylvania." I tried to sit up. The room tilted. "Easy," he said again. "Easy. You've been in and out for 2 days. They had to pump your stomach. Whatever you took, honey, it almost killed you." "I didn't take anything," I said. He looked at me a long time before he answered. "I know," he said. "That's why I've been sitting here." His name was Walter. He had been on the same bus, 2 seats behind me, traveling from New York to Cleveland to see his son. He had watched my husband at the terminal. He had watched him for the same reason a retired man with nothing to do watches anyone in a bus terminal, because he was bored and people watching and old enough to notice things. He said, and I will never forget this, "Ma'am, the man who put you on that bus, he didn't look like a man saying goodbye for a weekend. He looked like a man saying goodbye for good." I started to cry. I cried so hard, my chest hurt where they had put the tube down. Walter pulled his chair closer and didn't touch me, just sat there. And after a long time he said, "I told the police what I saw. I'm not going anywhere until I know somebody's coming for you. Is there somebody you want me to call?" I thought about my husband. I thought about my son. And then, for the first time in 15 years, I thought about my daughter and I said her name out loud. And I said the number of her cell phone, which I had memorized but never used, because she always called me and I never called her. And Walter wrote it down on the back of a hospital pamphlet about quitting smoking, and he stepped out into the hall to call her. And I lay there in that bed in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I understood, fully, completely, the way you understand a math problem when it finally clicks, that my husband had tried to murder me. She came that night. She drove from Albany to Erie in a rental car because her own car was in the shop, and she walked into my hospital room at 2 in the morning still wearing a blazer from court, and she stood in the doorway and looked at me, and I said, "Honey, I'm sorry." I said it before she'd taken her coat off. I said it before she put down her bag. "I'm sorry," I said. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have. Oh my God, I should have. Oh my God, I should have." She crossed the room in about 3 steps and she put her arms around me, and my 31-year-old daughter held me while I sobbed into the shoulder of her court blazer, and she said, over and over, the way you talk to a child, "You're alive. You're alive. We can deal with everything else. You're alive." Then she pulled back and she wiped my face with her thumb, and her face changed, and I saw the public defender in her, the woman who stares down judges in Albany County, and she said, "Mom, listen to me. From this minute on, you do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" I nodded. "You don't call him. You don't text him. He thinks you're dead, and we're going to let him keep thinking that until I tell you otherwise. Do you understand? He thinks I'm dead?" "Mom, of course he thinks you're dead. That's what the coffee was for." I nodded again. I didn't have words. "There's something else," she said. She sat down on the edge of the bed and she pulled out her phone and she showed me a screenshot of a court filing from 2 days earlier, from the morning of the bus. In fact, from less than 4 hours after my husband had walked away from the Port Authority. He had filed a petition in Westchester County to have me declared a missing person and to take temporary control of our joint assets. the boutiques, the house, the brokerage account, the retirement accounts, everything. He had filed it the same morning. He hadn't even waited a day. "Mom," my daughter said very quietly, "he had this drawn up before. This was prepared. His lawyer didn't write this up in 2 hours. This has been in a drawer somewhere for months, maybe years." I looked at the screen. I looked at my husband's signature, the same loopy signature that was on our marriage license and our mortgage, in the back of every birthday card he'd ever given me. And I said the only thing I could think of to say, which was, "What about your brother?" She didn't answer right away. "Mom," she said finally, "I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, even if it hurts. Did my brother know that Dad was having an affair?" I thought about it. I thought about every Sunday dinner. I thought about every golf Saturday. I thought about my son at 25, at 28, at 30, sitting across from me at the kitchen table eating my pot roast and telling me that work was good and Dad was good and everything was good. "Yes," I said. "I think he did." My daughter nodded. She looked at the wall for a minute, and then she said, in a voice I had never heard her use before, "Okay. Then we go after both of them." For 10 weeks I lived in a small apartment my daughter rented for me in Saratoga Springs, New York, under her cousin's name. I dyed my hair. I wore reading glasses I didn't need. I paid for groceries in cash. I did not call my mother, who lived in a memory care facility in New Jersey and wouldn't have known me anyway. I did not call my old friends. I did not call anyone. My daughter drove down every weekend. She brought me files, phone records, going back 4 years that she'd subpoenaed from the carrier, bank statements, hotel receipts. There was a woman named, I won't even say her name, a real estate agent, 41 years old. They had been together for 9 years. 9 years. They had taken trips together to Aruba and Sedona and Charleston. He had bought her a condo in White Plains in 2019 with money he'd moved out of one of our boutique business accounts in chunks of $9,500, just under the federal reporting threshold. 9 years. While I was packing his lunches. But the part that broke me, the part that made me sit on the floor of that little Saratoga apartment and put my face in my hands, was the email chain my daughter found between my husband and my son. It went back 6 months. They had discussed it. They had discussed me. My son had told my husband which of my prescriptions had warning labels about cardiac events. My son had suggested the bus station because there were no cameras in the South Concourse. My son had said in an email dated October 14th, "Dad, just make sure she doesn't suffer. She's still my mother. Just make sure she doesn't suffer." My daughter found me on the floor that night and she didn't say anything. She just sat down next to me and put her arm around my shoulders, and we sat like that on the linoleum for I don't know how long. After a while, I said, "I made him pancakes the morning he drove me to the bus." She didn't answer. I said, "He kissed me on the forehead before I got in the car." She didn't answer. I said, "How did I make a son who could do this?" And my daughter finally said, "Mom, you didn't make him. Dad did." The trial. Well, it wasn't really a trial. It was a hearing. My husband had filed his petition to have me declared missing and to take control of the assets, and that hearing was scheduled for January 22nd in a courtroom in White Plains in front of a Westchester County judge. My daughter and I worked with a senior partner at a firm in Manhattan. She was very clear that she could not represent me, that it was a conflict of interest, that I needed somebody with no last name connection to me. The lawyer's name was a woman about my age, gray hair, sharp suits, the kind of woman who orders salad with the dressing on the side and means it. She was the best thing that ever happened to my legal life, and she was my daughter's mentor from law school, and the two of them sat at the kitchen table of the Saratoga apartment for 10 weekends in a row eating Chinese food and building a case against my husband that, by the time they were done, was the size of 2 Bankers boxes. The plan was simple. My husband would walk into court on January 22nd expecting to be granted control of the missing wife's assets. Instead, the missing wife would walk in with him. My daughter said, the night before, "Mom, you can sit in the back. You don't have to come up the aisle. It's enough that he sees you." I said, I'm coming up the aisle. She looked at me. I'm going to walk up that aisle, I said, and I'm going to sit in the front row and I'm going to make him look at me. He owes me that. She nodded slowly. Okay, Mom. The morning of the hearing, I wore a navy dress my daughter bought me. I put on the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me, the same grandmother who told me not to put a man's name on anything. I sat in the back of a Lincoln Town car next to my daughter and we drove down the Taconic Parkway, the same parkway my husband and I had driven up to take the kids to summer camp every June for 12 years. And I thought, this is the last time I will be afraid of him. The courtroom in White Plains is small. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the New York State seal behind the judge's bench. We came in through a side door at 9:47 a.m. and sat in the front row on the left side, and at 9:52 a.m., my husband walked in through the main doors. He was wearing the camel coat. He didn't see me at first. He was talking to his lawyer, a man I recognized vaguely from a country club Christmas party. He was smiling. He looked. I want to be fair. He looked tired around the eyes, but he looked like a man who was about to win something. Then he turned his head. I have spent my whole life trying to find words for the look on a person's face. It's part of why I read so many books. And I will tell you, with all the words I've collected in 62 years of reading, I cannot describe the look on my husband's face when he saw me sitting in that front row in a navy dress with my grandmother's pearls in my ears. He stopped walking. His mouth opened. His briefcase slipped about 2 inches in his hand and he grabbed it without looking at it. The color in his face did something I didn't know. Color in his face did something I didn't know. Color could do. It left, then it came back wrong. Splotchy. Red on the cheekbones, white around the mouth. His lawyer said, "Are you all right?" My husband said nothing. I held his eyes. I held his eyes the way you hold a leash. I did not smile, and I did not cry, and I did not look away. I let him stand there in the aisle of the Westchester County Courthouse, and I let him understand what I understood now, which was this. The woman he had walked away from at the Port Authority bus station on a gray November morning was the same woman who, 60 seconds from now, was going to take everything he had ever taken from her, plus interest. The judge came in. We rose. We sat. The bailiff called the case. My husband's lawyer, to his credit, tried to ask for a continuance. The judge denied it. My lawyer stood up. She said very calmly, "Your Honor, my client is not missing. My client is the woman in the second seat of the front row, and she would like the opportunity to address the court regarding her husband's petition." The judge, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, looked at me over those reading glasses and said, "Ma'am, would you please stand up and state your full name for the record?" I stood up. My knees did not shake. I will be proud of that until I die. I said my name. The hearing took 2 days. My lawyer presented everything. The phone records, the hotel receipts, the condo in White Plains, the 9-year affair, the bank transfers and $9,500 increments, the pharmacy records showing my husband had filled a prescription for a sleep medication that wasn't his on October 30th, and again on November 6th, and again on November 6th, and again on November 11th. The toxicology report from St. Vincent's in Erie, which showed the same medication in my blood at a level that should have killed a woman my size. And then, at the end of the second day, she presented the email chain between my husband and my son. The judge took a recess. The judge took a long recess. When she came back, she looked at my husband and she looked at his lawyer and she said, "Counselor, I am going to deny this petition. I am also on my own motion referring this entire matter to the Westchester County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Bailiff, please inform the petitioner that he is not to leave this courthouse without first speaking to the officers I am about to call." She banged her gavel. She left. My husband was arrested in the hallway outside the courtroom at 4:18 p.m. on January 23rd. My son was arrested at his apartment in Yonkers at 6:45 the same evening. Both of them were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and a list of financial crimes that took the prosecutor 9 minutes to read out loud at the arraignment. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant. I want to tell you that I went home and ate a steak and slept for 12 hours. I didn't. I went back to the Saratoga apartment with my daughter and I sat on the couch in my coat and I cried for 3 hours straight. I cried for the woman who folded the towel 3 times and called her 16-year-old daughter a liar. I cried for the boy I had taught to tie his shoes who had told his father which of my pills could stop my heart. I cried for my grandmother who had warned me, and for 32 years of pancakes I had made for a man who was already, even then, looking at me the way a man looks at a problem he's planning to solve. My daughter made me tea, real tea, in a real mug, and she watched me drink the first sip before she let go of the handle. We didn't talk about it, she just watched. And when I had finished the cup, she took it out of my hands and she washed it in the sink, and she came back and she sat down next to me and we watched a rerun of a cooking show until I fell asleep on her shoulder. It's been a year and 4 months. My husband took a plea deal. He's serving 22 years in a medium security prison in upstate New York. He'll be 84 when he gets out, if he gets out. The real estate agent he loved for 9 years testified against him in exchange for immunity, and then she sold the White Plains condo and moved to Phoenix. My son is serving 14 years. He wrote me a letter 4 months ago. I have not opened it. It's in a drawer in the kitchen under the takeout menus, and some days I think I will open it, and most days I think I will not. My daughter says I don't have to decide. My daughter says I don't owe him a single thing, including the dignity of being read. I sold the house in Westchester. I could not live in it. I bought a smaller place in Saratoga Springs, 3 blocks from my daughter's friends, 4 blocks from a bakery that makes a sourdough that reminds me of being 25. I kept one of the boutiques and sold the other 2. The one I kept is the original, the one I opened in 1989 with the money my grandmother left me. And I am there 4 mornings a week, and I steam dresses, and I talk to customers, and I am, against everything I would have predicted on November 12th of last year, happy. Some days. In the mornings, mostly. The evenings are still hard. My daughter has dinner with me every Sunday now. She drives down from Albany. She brings the dog. We eat at my kitchen table, which is a different kitchen table than the one where I used to feed my son pot roast, and she tells me about her cases, and I tell her about the boutique, and we don't talk about her father unless we need to. A few weeks ago, while she was loading the dishwasher, she said, without looking at me, "Mom, I forgive you for not believing me. When I was 16, I just want to say it out loud." I had to sit down. I said, "Honey, you shouldn't have to." She closed the dishwasher. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. She said, "I know, but I'm doing it anyway because I'm 31 years old and I don't want to carry it anymore. And I don't want you to carry it either." I cried. Of course I cried. I have cried more in the last year than I cried in the previous 61 combined, and I have come to believe that this is not a sign of weakness but a sign of being, at last, awake. Walter, the man from the bus, sends me a Christmas card every year. He lives in Cleveland with his son. The card last December had a picture of his grandchildren. I sent him a sourdough loaf in the mail packed in dry ice, and he called me to say it was the best bread he'd ever eaten, and we talked for an hour about absolutely nothing. If you are watching this, and I know some of you are watching this, women my age, women who have been folding towels for 30 years and pretending the kitchen is yellow, I want to tell you one thing. If your daughter ever sits on the edge of your bed and tells you something hard, listen to her. Listen to her even if it costs you the marriage. Listen to her even if it costs you the kitchen and the house and the man and the version of your life you've worked 30 years to believe in. Because I'll tell you what I know now, what it took a paper cup of coffee at the Port Authority to teach me. The version of your life that requires you to call your daughter a liar is not a version worth saving. I should have known that at 46. I know it now at 62. And every Sunday, when my daughter pulls into the driveway with the dog in the back seat, I say it out loud to the empty kitchen before I open the door. Listen to her. Listen to her. Listen to her. I will spend the rest of my life listening. I think about that lukewarm cup of coffee almost every morning now, the way some people think about a prayer before breakfast. I think about how I held it in my hands at the Port Authority and didn't ask a single question, not because I was stupid. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't stupid. I was practiced. I had spent 32 years practicing not asking questions, and by the morning of November 12th, not asking had become as natural to me as breathing. That's the thing nobody tells you about a long marriage. The lies don't sneak up on you. You build them, brick by brick, with your own two hands every time you choose the easier answer over the truer one. When my Caroline came home at 16 and told me what she saw at the plaza, I had a choice. I had a real, fully grown, adult choice in that moment, and I picked the version of my life that didn't require me to do anything hard. I picked yellow kitchens. I picked folded towels. I picked a man over my own daughter, and I told myself it was love, and it wasn't. It was cowardice wearing love's coat. The cause of what happened to me on that bus was not my husband's cruelty. My husband's cruelty was the weather. The cause was me choosing not to look for 15 years, every single day, choosing not to look. For 15 years, every single day, choosing not to look. And the universe is very patient, but it is not infinitely patient, and eventually a paper cup shows up at a bus station and you have to drink what you've been pouring for yourself the whole time. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because I am 62 years old and I've learned exactly 3 things worth passing on, and I want to give them to you while I still have a voice. The first is that your character is not what you do when it's easy. Your character is what you do when believing your child will cost you your marriage. I failed that test at 46. I am trying to pass it now, one Sunday dinner at a time. The second is that intelligence is not how much you know. Intelligence is how willing you are to look at what's right in front of you. I had every piece of evidence I needed at 46. The receipts were in the laundry. The phone calls were in the next room. I was not unintelligent. I was unwilling. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole ball game. The third is that strength is a much quieter thing than people think. Strength is not the woman who walks up the courthouse aisle in a navy dress. Strength is the woman who, after 32 years of being someone else's idea of a wife, sits on a couch in a small apartment in Saratoga Springs and lets herself cry until something underneath the crying becomes solid. That part is the part nobody films. That part is where the actual life is. I will spend the rest of mine listening to my daughter. That is my whole religion now. I recommend it.